very happy Ramadan Mubarak, a blessed month when it's time for reflections on issues that doesn't necessarily just concern our families, but the extended family, the Ummah. A few days ago, we heard about the acquittal of the Birmingham murder of 3 young men which took place last summer after the riots. We are not here to discuss the actual case, it would be quite wrong, but we are looking at the fallout, the connections between the Birmingham acquittal and what led to those 3 young men being killed. As the Judge Flokes asked for calm after the acquittal of the men, we respect his decision. And of course, as Muslims, in this blessed month, we ask for people to reflect and of course remain calm. Our prayers will always be with those who suffer in silence. But in this blessed month, I think we're asking for reflections. We're asking our viewers to ponder on the concept of justice. Not justice simply that exists between the government and its community, but also justice at a very local level, e.g. husband and wife. We're looking at how do we convey that justice. What is the concept of justice? Is there a different system? Is there a better system to the one that we have? If so, what is that system? And if we as Muslims claim to have that system, why have we not been able to relay that message? Is there some shortfall in the way that we deal with justice in our own society? Today's conversation is very broad. We would love to hear from you, not only on your concept of justice, but how does one feel when one has been dealt unjustly? Where do we put them? Where's that balance? Today I'm joined by my young colleague who's been with us on many occasions. Assalamu alaikum, Majid.
Welcome.
Welcome. Ramzan Mubarak to you.
Khair Mubarak to you.
How is it going up to now?
Alhamdulillah, going well so far.
It's good. It's a first. Well, in fact, I forgot to say that we wish all those people who started on Friday and Saturday, because of course some people started on Friday. Ramzan is a time of reflection, Majid, isn't it? It makes us so tuned in, doesn't it? But sometimes we tend to forget that there are things happening around us which really needs for us to look at the system of justice what on earth happened a year ago on our streets? What led to that, riots? We've seen, you were too young probably to remember that we had riots, the poll tax riots. In Spain, in Europe, we're looking at riots. We're looking at a situation which is not conducive to good relations. What's going on in our world?
Definitely, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As you mentioned, Ramadan time is a time for reflection. I think that's a very good starting point for our discussion, because a lot of people limit Ramadan's reflections to just some sort of introspection about some sort of self-journey about themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's it really. And what you mentioned, is much more broader than this. So the concept of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, these are ideas related to reflection, what's happening around you. View the events from an Islamic perspective.
Sure.
So let's not become just introvert and that's it. But alhamdulillah, I think the topic that we've chosen today is a lively topic. I think we need to have this discussion, and it's quite timely because this event of the deaths of these 3 brothers from these 3 Muslim brothers from Birmingham happened just around Ramadan time, exactly 1 year ago.
Exactly.
And also we found that one of the fathers of the teenagers who passed away in the car accident, he became quite famous in the sense of how he dealt with that particular case. Absolutely. Which was for asking for people to remain calm, cool and collected about this, and not turn it into something which is going to be into like a race riot or some sort of further developments from there, which could have led to further problems for the local area there where these children were from.
But I don't think there was a dry eye when the father stood up and made those comments. This can't have been easy. Absolutely. I dread to think what the women of the family were going through. Our fair sex, as they say, we are much more emotional. Mm-hmm. But it could have turned nasty, couldn't it? It could have turned very nasty. If you look at what happened with the case that happened here in Blackburn a few years ago, where an asylum seeker, there was a hit-and-run case, the incident was actually hijacked by the BNP. And we saw that the EDL march in this town, and they said they actually came because they were looking for justice for that little girl. So it could have gone bad, couldn't it? Were we driven by a different system?
Yeah, I think the Islamic values played a big role in the way the brother Tariq Jahan, who became quite famous, as I mentioned, across the news, and with the statements that he had made on this issue. Yeah, I think there was a strong Islamic sentiment behind there. So, for example, he made comments like, as soon as the incident happened and people were ready to do something, that's the nature of people. Something happens and we want to do something now. Right, okay. They felt aggrieved. They felt that this was a targeted killing in the end, which ended up happening. That somebody drove a car into 3 people. Wasn't just an accident. And he stood up and he asked for calm, for people to, if they wanted to do something, he said go home and pray for these these children. If you haven't prayed before, pray now. And even people were coming out bringing flowers. So he addressed that. He also said, in our religion, this is not the done thing. If you want to do something for the 3 teenagers who have passed away, make dua for them, go home and go and pray for them. So I think at the heart of our discussion today is something which his brother he exemplified on that particular day last year.
It's how lived it, isn't it? And this is what I meant when I said that if there is an alternative, why haven't we been able to convey that? Because that brother Jahan conveyed it. He really conveyed that. It was such a difficult time. As I said, it could have turned very nasty. And then what he also did was to bring other members of different communities together. He created this concept, which I really have a lot of difficulties with, concept of cohesion. And if there was any cohesion, I think it happened in Birmingham on that particular day. But there are other questions that arises from it, that we also have injustice, whilst at the same time we have justice. I mean, we sit in a country where we can raise our voices, we can talk about if things go wrong. I mean, there are many, many parts of the world where this could not possibly have happened, where you and I could sit and discuss concept of justice in the way that we do. If you look at what's happening within our own country, you have Babar Ahmed, who's been in jail for the past 9 years. So where's the concept of justice there? People can turn around and say, well, hold on, Babar Ahmed's been in jail for the past 9 years. Where's justice? Why is it that justice has not been applied? Is it because there's justice up to a certain level, and when you raise your head above that, then we have a problem?
Definitely, yeah. I think people look at these contradictions, you can call them. So, for example, a single mother who has got a child or has got 2 children, no husband to support her, no family behind to support her, is claiming benefits, is being forced into getting work, forced to go down job centre because that's the only avenue that she's got to secure some sort of livelihood and get some money, income for her family, and being forced to get onto a job and made to do all these things at the expense of her children and spending time with them, and told that, look, if you do not commit, your benefits will be cut and we will not allow you to go back on again. On the other hand, you had the MP expenses where people were openly abusing the system. What happened to these guys?
They're sitting at home watching, maybe watching us, but not only that, but about the bankers. Appalling system.
Yeah.
I mean, the bonuses. We see, people who have become homeless. You talk about single mothers. In fact, single mothers are suffering. They are at the bottom of the pile at the moment because they can't afford childcare, yet they cannot work for whatever reason, and yet their benefits have gone. So, and I think this is where we need to talk. Is our system, which appears to be very just at a certain level, but if there are any hiccups, it falls apart. We have seen communism fall apart. We have seen socialism fall apart. We are seeing capitalism fall apart. If we have a system, where is that system? Who's going to lead on that system? And why have we not been able to talk about it? Is there a system?
Yeah, definitely. There's a debate definitely there. As you mentioned, the other two systems, we've had communism finished. It lasted, till the early 90s. Started off in the late 20s, as far as I can remember, and it's gone. Yeah, it's had its time. Its inherent cracks and contradictions, and the fact that it couldn't fully function in terms of the philosophy of communism, it led to the demise of it in the end. The global player became capitalism, which came onto a larger scene, with America being the leading capitalist state. But even this recession, where has it started off from? It started off from America. So the recession started there, began to hit all the rest of the world. We're looking at Europe at this moment in now. Greece, we found one of the countries, other countries which have been Spain. Yeah, they've had to bail out these type of countries. With the EU, there's discussions about, right, okay, is it even worth it having this now? It was a concept for other things, but at this moment in time, it just seems to be saving other countries at this moment in time. So there's a collapse there for definite, and that has been primarily because of the way the principles upon which these societies are built upon are decaying. There's cracks in between them now, and it's become a lot more evident in terms of the way these cases are mentioned about the idea of justice. Bankers get bailed out, get bonuses, whilst people on benefits get penalised and are on the streets. They've got no home, housing, and these things. Politicians getting away with anything and everything. So you got Silvio Berlusconi doing everything left, right, and centre.
But they can get away with it.
You and
I would have been fired. Let's take a break. We're going for a short break for Zohar Azan. Please come back, join us. The telephone number is on the screen. Get involved in a conversation. Maybe you have an opinion. Maybe you know the concept of justice, which is something which we really need to grapple with. Join me within the next few minutes. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Community Platform. Just before our break, of course, the discussion is about, broader discussion about what happened in Birmingham last year. 3 young men were killed and the people arrested have all been acquitted. We honor and we do honor what the judges said. But we need to ask some very difficult questions, or else we trust our security forces. They are difficult questions to be asked. In the past 22 years, approximately 1,400 people have died in police custody. Not a single officer has been arrested. Today, we're asking those difficult questions. We're asking people to be reflective in this month, this blessed month of Ramadan. We live in a country where we are able to ask these questions. There are many, many places where we would not be able to have this discussion. At what level do these discussions become, the discussion will not happen. Whereas we talk about justice, where justice can be had at a certain level, we also see injustice. As we said earlier, we have seen the case of Babar Ahmed, who's been in prison for the past 9 years without a trial. Here you have injustice. What does that injustice produce? And justice is not just about the government and their reaction or the security forces, but it's also about what we do at home. So this month is very much about that reflection. Of course, I'm joined by my young friend Majid. Assalamu alaikum, Majid. Welcome back. Just before we left off, Majid, we were discussing what happened in Birmingham. We looked at what is the fallout. We looked at about different systems. And we keep coming back to the same question. We believe that we as Muslims have a system. How come we've not been able to convey that to the rest of the world? Or is that happening but slowly? Or do we feel that it's stagnating? Can we do something individually and collectively to portray the system that we believe is the most perfect? Because of course it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, I think from here, living in Western society, the first thing that we can do is introduce the discussions and put them into the public domain. That Islam is not just the rituals, morals, and a few worships, but it's much more broader than this. And we need to start looking at cases like, the ones that we're talking about today, whether it was the riots, what led to the riots, the case in itself, and other cases that have been going on. We've talked about, how there's discrepancies and contradictions continuously all the time, where, the people on the lower level are penalised, while people on the upper level are walking away free, even with murder and blood on their hands. Mm-hmm. So we need to introduce this discussion about how does Islam address these problems, these judicial problems, these social problems, these societal issues, these economic issues. That would be our role here, I think, living in the West. When nobody's calling for a parallel judicial system, we're not saying that introduce Sharia law and, kick up another fuss like was kicked up when Archbishop Rowan Williams, he said, certain aspects of Islam should be accepted in British law, such as marriage and divorce. He was talking about. He wasn't talking about other aspects, and that kicked up a huge debate. What does Sharia mean?
Yeah. I think this is a good point. I think we have a caller. Let's just take Brother Saqib. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Brother Saqib, can you just tell us where you're from?
Sorry, I can't hear what you're saying properly.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yes, brother. What do you have to say? Hello.
Sorry, I can't hear what you're saying.
I can hear you. We can hear you very clearly. What do you...
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry?
Sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, well, we are today discussing what happened to 3 of our brothers who were killed last year, and we're looking at a broader, we're not here to discuss the case, but we're looking here at the fallout. We're looking at the concept of justice and injustice, and we've been discussing as to that whereas we live in a country where justice does prevail, but there are certain instances where unfortunately we have hiccups, and we have seen that in various cases. Do you have any comments for us?
Yes, I would just like to say that it was a big shock when we found out the verdict of what happened. Okay. And the judiciary of this country and the legal system itself has shown the kind of sham it is, and has showed us that unless you have a lot of money, you are not guaranteed justice in any way, shape or form. And as far as we know, due to the hiccups of some police officers, the whole case was abandoned and thrown out. And we can't understand how 8 people, who killed someone for sure, are walking the streets freely.
No, we understand, and as I said earlier, I don't know if you were watching the program, Brother Saqib, that our prayers are with those and the families of those who suffer not only in silence but all over the world, because it's a month of reflection. We understand that there will always be situations where people feel that injustice has been done, and of course those people understand that much better than the people certainly on the panel can understand. We appreciate their call. Jazakallah khair, brother. I don't know if my young friend has anything to say.
Yes, I started to comment upon what Saqib just picked up on there in terms of the justice being able to be bought in this country. Mm-hmm. And I think what he spoke about there is actually true. Justice can be bought. So we talked about, are we living in a society?
Let me just stop you there. Brother Saqib, we appreciate your call. I think you have started a discussion at another angle. We are very grateful for your call. Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Remember us in your du'as. Wa alaikum assalam. But I think Saqib here talked about that there are people who can buy justice, right? Yeah. But we've seen that with people like Bob Diamond and people like in the banking industry. Don't they buy justice?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, that shows what the brother touched upon in terms of the legal system and the process which people have to go through to arrive at getting justice on making sure that the case is looked at in an independent way. That's all thrown out the window, especially when you put money in there. We see that in quite a lot of cases. I remember as far back as when we were watching the O.J. Simpson case in America, that guy had money, and that's why this case was allowed to drag on and on and on and on and on.
But that happens in Muslim countries too, doesn't it? Really, when you think about it.
Yeah, but we're talking about here where we're talking about mature democracies. We're talking about this is where you can get justice. This is where people can demand their rights and gain a fair trial. In these societies, we've seen these type of cases happening. So where money is involved, where people have the ability to buy or hire out a solicitor or a lawyer to fight their case, the bigger pay packet that you're offering to that solicitor and that lawyer is going to mean, right, okay, this person will get this case in his favour for definite.
Right. Would you also then agree, then we just discussed that in the past 22 years there have been over 1,400 deaths within the police custody. Should IPCC be actually investigating their own personnel? That doesn't, I mean, for a lot of people that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's been...
can one investigate one's own, if we can use that phrase?
Yeah, it needs to be done, definitely, and that's what the police should be continuously doing. So there's been cases of racism being exposed, in a BBC programme, Panorama, in 2003, I remember watching that, about, they called it institutionalised racism at that time. When you look at this case that we're talking about now, people in Birmingham, it's understandable that they may feel that this has become into a case where 3 Muslim men, 3 Asian men, 3 men of Pakistani background, may have got this case against them because of their ethnicity or because of their religion. And as the brother mentioned, maybe because of the hiccup which was caused as a consequence of certain police officers not doing their job properly. It can turn into that type of discussion. So I think the police needs to investigate it in a bit more detail.
But I think more importantly, what you said earlier, Majid, is that we have the right to have a discussion. Unless we speak, we will always drive these concerns underground. And we have seen that happen. I mean, only a few weeks ago, where the government wanted to, or is going through, criminalizing forced marriages, for instance, and people didn't want to talk about it because we'll just go ahead and do it. And what we were saying is that unless that discussion takes place, you can drive that discussion underground, but it will not take place. So I think for us, certainly at this level, conversation is very important. Can we get our leaders to have discussions on this? How do we do that? Because sometimes even our leadership don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the case, obviously, because there are still things happening. But what we're looking at is this concept of justice, and how people see that concept of justice. Are there any conversations that are too volatile? Do you think that there are any other cases that are too volatile, that can never be touched by mere mortals like us?
Sorry, how do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I remember I'd gone abroad a few months ago, and there are certain minority that is targeted in certain countries. We had this discussion where Christians have been targeted for various reasons, and that conversation doesn't happen, and people are warned continuously, we don't talk about it. And I just wonder whether some of us will have to say conversation needs to take place.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation needs to take place, definitely, because certain people have been victimized, certain people are subject to abuse and even attacks, some of them verbal, some of them physical. So yes, we need to discuss these issues. And I think in the context of what we were talking about earlier on about justice, this is synonymous to justice, actually, dealing with people with laws and legislation that meet their human needs. And in Islam, we have this process. We have laws, we have qanun, which deal with these particular issues of how to tackle or deal with the issues of minorities.
Within a framework.
Other faiths, within the Islamic framework.
Let's take this call. Let's just take the Brother Nasir, Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nasir. Ramzan Mubarak to you, sir.
Ramzan Mubarak to you and to your guest as well.
What do you have to say, sir?
Sister, I just wanted to discuss here. There's been a recent petition that's been going out that's in regards to, the autopsies that are done on Muslims, where they basically tamper with your body, your heart, your lungs, your brain, and all these things. What I was trying to say is that the Jewish community, for numerous amount of years, because they've got such a strong vote and such a strong voice, they had the power to basically get special dispensation where autopsies are not taken on to the people that passed away. Now, in our community, we have also got an opportunity to take this on and have it on board for all the Muslims that pass away, so that we don't have...
Brother Nasir, can I just stop you there for a minute? I think the conversation that you may wish to have may be for the scholars, and Ummah TV does have a program which says your question are answered. Maybe your question may be much more pertinent for that, I think. Our discussion is very informal discussion about justice and the system of justice. I wonder if you have something to say on that at all. Sorry, are you still with us? I think the line's dropped. Do call back, Brother Nasir. Sorry, Majid, we were talking about that, yes, that the difficult conversation must remain within certain framework. And we've seen some very difficult conversation taking place within on this show.
Yeah, definitely. But so we'll go back to the topic of minorities.
Yes.
Minorities living in this country don't get justice. Let's be quite frank about that. Muslims are treated as second-class citizens in this country. Let's not beat the bush about that as well. That's definitely true. Whether it's to do with what you mentioned in terms of the forced marriage laws, which specifically target the Muslim community, or whether it's to do with programs about terrorism being rolled out, which specifically target the Muslim community, whether it's schooling and education, and where Muslim schools are targeted because they are saying that you're not integrating enough and you are hotbeds for extremism. So Muslims are the subject of abuse in this society. Yes, our good voices who are standing forward and protecting the voice of Muslims and demanding that we be treated justly, but on the whole we can see that Western society doesn't have a green card and the gold medal when tackling minorities. So when we are lectured about, let's say, the Muslim world, and yes, the Muslim world is not in a correct state as we should have it, where Muslims and Christians and Jews and Hindus and Sikhs can live in a peaceful environment under the shade of Islam. That doesn't exist. What we have is dictatorships, what we have is democratic dynasties that exist inside the Muslim world. We just pass on rule and law and create laws in the favour of families, create laws in the favour of big businesses which keep them in power. That's what we have there. So we can't say that when we go there that this is a reflection of Muslim societies, because it's a far picture from what it should be. So we have a very clear Islamic judicial system where we found cases in the past where the Khalifa of the times used to be accounted by non-Muslims. So there's a famous case, and everybody knows about this. Let's put it into perspective, where a Jewish man, he came to the house of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhum and stole his shield. And then Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhum, he said, look, let's put this person to court. He stole my shield. Do you have any evidence that belongs to you? The judge asked. No. Do you have a witness that you can bring forward? Yes, it's my son. Right, okay, we can't have your son as a witness. And the Jew was acquitted. And that's when the Jewish man, he said, right, okay, I stole it, and I testify to Islam and the justice of Islam. So we have cases like this. We have cases of Jews and Christians living in the Muslim world for centuries.
Well, Spain, for instance.
Spain, we have, even in Egypt now, in the Muslim world, where the world has existed, had Islam as a ruling force, as a system of justice, been persecuting them or denying them their rights, wouldn't have they gone long time ago?
Let me ask you I'm going to jump in, I'm going to ask a difficult question here. Muslims have always lived as a majority, right? We find ourselves in a unique position in the past few, maybe 100 years or so, where we're living as a minority. Are we still trying to get used to living as minorities? Because we have always lived as a majority, if you think about it in the world, and suddenly we find ourselves living as a minority. Is that a difficult transition? Is that transition proving to be difficult for us?
Yes, I think one of the fundamental reasons why many people migrated from the Muslim world to here was because of colonization and occupation of their own lands. And they needed a better future because they couldn't make ends meet. So people came for opportunity, for hope, and they settled in these countries, and then their families settled here. And like we have it now in Europe, there's around about 20 million Muslims living here now.
Sure.
But majority of these people, quite a few of them, are coming from backgrounds, from countries which were politically interfered with. So whether that was Uganda, whether that was Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, or the Arab world, where dictatorships they existed and were supported by Western regimes, they weren't getting anywhere, and therefore people had to, migrate to other lands, whether it was out of financial needs, whether it was persecution by the government for accounting them, which was supported by Western regimes. So yes, it is an abnormal situation. Muslims have lived, as a majority, have lived ideally under an Islamic government which protected their rights, which provided economic opportunities, which provided avenues for seeking justice, which provided avenues for correcting the wrongs in society. With that not existing, with that state apparatus not existing, yes, we are in an abnormal situation at the moment. However, there's an opportunity here as well. We need to remember that it's not the first time this has happened, but even in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muslims migrated out of persecution from Mecca to Abyssinia. And in Abyssinia there was a fantastic opportunity for da'wah, for discussing Islam, and there was a vibrant community that lived there. But when they heard about the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam establishing a fully functioning state and a government, many of them, they returned back.
Right. I think Brother Nasir has been able to get back to us. Brother Nasir, assalamu alaikum, welcome back.
Right, the point that I was trying to make earlier on is that Jews have got a voice. We do not have a voice, or we do not exercise the voice that we've had been, the opportunity that we've been given in this country. And the issue of the deceased and autopsies, Jews have been given special dispensation for this. We have the right as well, but we need to go onto the Parliament website and make a veto, like basically sign a petition.
Sure.
Now, you're talking about justice. This is a very important issue. Now, our people, we exercise the voice that we've been given, therefore we have no justice. Do you understand? That's what we need to do as members of the British community. We need to exercise our voice. I mean, your colleague there was talking about, Muslims migrating from other countries. We've migrated to this country, we've integrated into society, but still, some of us are so lackadaisical in our thought process that we do not exercise the voice that we've been given. We've all got equal rights. We've been given these equal rights. Don't exercise them.
I think that's
who's to blame? Where's the injustice happening? I think we as a community are doing it to ourselves.
I think you have raised
that's the point that I think Reggie was trying to make.
I think you have raised the most important point, Brother Nasir. I'm sorry, I think the line dropped or something happened, but I think you have actually hit the nail. You have raised the most important points, that we do not always take advantage of the platforms that we have been provided. I think Majid, Brother Nasir has just said.
I mean, there's a point which Brother Nasir is making, which is about being active and being able to vocalize your concerns. So the very fact that we have Ummah Channel and we sat down here discussing these issues,
we have an opportunity.
We have our own opportunities here now. So we are discussing these things. We do have our platforms which are independent of a certain process which sometimes doesn't give us justice. So for example, you talked about going onto the Parliament website and applying for something where we can have a voice, get maybe a petition going. Babar Ahmed had a petition going. We remember
147,000 signatures were collected.
You needed, I think, is 120,000 signatures for it to be a topic of discussion in the Houses of Parliament. What happened in the end?
Yes, no, that's a
okay. So there's another thing that we need to think about there.
Yeah.
So rather than taking that debate there, which was okay, if it would have happened, that would have been good, but it didn't, and that's why we talked about an injustice when it comes to minorities living in this country. We have our platforms now, so we are using these avenues. That's why I've actually come here today, because we've been invited as guests to discuss these issues and get to a wider, our voices heard at a wider level in terms of locally, nationally, and even internationally. I believe Ummah Channel is watched internationally as well.
Yes, we are seen abroad. Brother Nasir, you have raised a very important point. We appreciate that. I do apologize that the line was dropped earlier. Jazakallah khair for your point. Remember everyone in your duas. Thank you.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Thank you. Ramadan Mubarak to you too, brother. I think Brother Nasir has, yes, I agree. But I think he is very right. And I don't know if you remember, but we did a program on leadership, that we really desperately need very strong leadership to take this conversation at a different level. We We do it at a grassroots level.
Yeah.
It needs to go somewhere else. Let's take a very short break. We're going to take a short break. Join me and my colleague Majid Iqbal on a very interesting discussion. We like to think so. Don't go away now. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Community Platform. Today's subject is very much about what happened in Birmingham last year. During the riots, 3 young men were killed. A few days ago, 8 men were acquitted. We are looking at the fallout. We are looking at a discussion about justice and injustice and what happens when injustice is committed. We saw how one of the boys' father became an overnight hero, and quite rightly too. Had it not been for him, the situation in Birmingham might have been very different. So we honor people like Mr. Jahan, who conveyed an Islamic message of peace and justice. But what do we understand? Do we receive justice? I'm joined, of course, by a young man who is quite a frequent guest on Community Platform. Assalamu alaikum, Majid.
Walaikum salam.
Majid, before we went on to the break, we were talking about minorities, and we said that we as a minority don't always receive that kind of justice.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how Muslims have lived as a majority and suddenly find themselves in difficult situations. What can we do further as individuals to see that justice? Do we need to be just in our own life first before we can talk about justice at a larger scale? Very simple example would be, how can a man be just to a woman? That's like domestic violence, for instance. That's not justice. How can we talk about justice if we do not, actually live the life of or justice? It's for women as well, of course. I'm just giving us an example.
Yeah, I mean, throughout our discussion today, we've been talking how Islam talks about justice. This is an ayah of the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, I think it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kunu qawwamina lillahi shuhada'il bil qist, wa la yajrimannakum shana'anu qawmin ala ta'dilu, u'dilu huwa aqrabu lit taqwa, wattaqullaha innallaha khabirun bima ta'malun. In translation to the nearest meaning of the Quran, Allah says, O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm for Allah, witnesses in justice, and do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness, and fear Allah, indeed Allah is acquainted with what you do. So justice, as you mentioned, is not just something linked to societal discussions. Yes, there is a strong element of our individual lives, that we need to be just in our relationships, be just in our transactions, be just in our relationships with people who are outside of our family, the people who we deal with, whether we are at work, whether we're at school, whether we're at college or university, as well as the societal discussion there, where justice has a broader meaning, where if you feel that somebody has done something against you, then there's a process available where you express that concern, and through that then there is a hearing about this issue, and justice is served, justice is done in the case, whether that verdict is against you, whether that verdict is in your favor. We believe that the Islamic justice then would need to be applied in that particular scenario.
We seem to forget sometimes, I think, that when we're talking about whether it's justice or an Islamic concept, that there's something that we apply to our everyday life and something that we talk about. An example would be in many Muslim countries at the moment, I was watching, where poor people cannot buy food because the prices during Ramadan are hiked up. That isn't justice, is it? In fact, when you think about it, this blessed month when we should be actually gathering the blessings, the prices should be falling, not going up. But we see that all the time. So how can we say that we are not receiving justice from someone who is not a Muslim when we see injustice happening within our own Muslim communities by our own so-called Muslim people?
Yeah, going back to the example of the Muslim world that you quoted there, that is a repercussion of the political situation people in that country are finding themselves. Again, it's a discussion to do with the system and how the system doesn't offer a correct economic way to dealing with issues. So when you have the wealth in the hands of a few, and it's like the piece of cake, and all that's been given to the rest of society is one slice out of the 12. The 11 are kept for somebody else, and the one which is being distributed to society. There's hoarding of wealth, there's interest, there's issues to do with how wealth which doesn't even belong to individuals or companies is in their hands at the moment, when this should be the wealth of the Ummah, whether this is the oil or the gas or the water that should be made available at cost price. So Islam talks about addressing these issues such that then everybody can benefit from there then. And the wealth is circulated in the economy and doesn't remain in the hands of a few. So in those scenarios there, in an individual capacity, I'll do whatever I can if I was in that situation to make sure prices are at a level which is affordable to the community that I'm serving. But then if I was a shopkeeper, I'm struggling then because I'm then having to buy goods at a higher price from somebody else, and I can't live then. So again, it's a discussion to do with justice which is not being served at the highest level, which is at the political authority there. And there's a hadith about this. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, there are 7 categories of people whom Allah will shelter under His shade on a day when there will be no shade except His, and one of them is a just leader. So again, the word just and justice synonymous with ruling with authority, with political authority. If we don't have a ruler who is just, which means he applies Islam 100%, then we're going to get into these scenarios where people will suffer, and they will suffer miserably.
But we keep choosing the same, this is...
We don't choose these people actually, we don't choose these people.
I'm not too sure, but we keep choosing these people to keep
We didn't choose the new Prime Minister of Pakistan who's quoted as Raja Rental.
Yes.
So we've had Mr. 10% Zardari, and now Raja Rental, where did the name rental come from? Again, kickbacks from deals that he could get with people. We didn't choose him, the party chose him, who's in power at this moment in time.
Can there be a bloodless revolution? Can we think of something where, we've seen the Arab Spring, where lots and lots of people have lost their lives, to come where they are. But is there a way out for us? We pray, we go and vote when it's the elections times, we want the best, but we keep coming back to square one. We see riots happening because the economic system is in shambles. We see the Muslim world. Look at Somalia, people are starving. There has to be a way out. What is the way out? It's not going to happen overnight. It would probably not in my lifetime.
We need to see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is the thing. And a lot of people are looking...
Can you see that light?
Yes, we are seeing this light because we have strong faith in the deen of Islam and the solutions which Islam provides, which at the end will provide justice for everybody. So when we look at sky-high prices of electricity in Pakistan, and people having to sleep outside because inside it's roasting hot in the city, and their fans are not working, they're having to bring up bed. This is women as well we're talking about here now. How shameful this is. How will Islam resolve the electricity crisis? And it's very simple. It will break the back of the monopoly of multinational corporations who have bought the resources, which are electricity and gas, and they bought them off the government because the government can handle them. Musharraf in 2004, he said, if we can't handle our resources, we might as well sell them off. These are the typical ideas with which these leaders, they are leading these people. Shameless. What does Islam say about that? Electricity and gas cannot belong to any private individual, cannot belong to any multinational corporation. So straight away, these organizations will be ejected, the resources will be brought into the fold of state property and will be sold at cost price. Not at sky-high prices, but people are actually... How can industry work when there's no electricity? How are factories supposed to function? The whole productiveness of that society, people are getting laid off because of that. Because that one thing, and that one rule of Islam can ensure that justice is served to every single individual in society, whether you're Muslim, whether you're non-Muslim.
Who are we fighting? Aggressive secularism or corrupt leadership?
Both, unfortunately. The corrupt leadership enforces secularism in society and say this is the way forward. That religious laws are not good for us. Religious laws send us backwards. Religious laws, are for the past. And that is rubbish, because democracy is older than Islam. And that was put into the dustbins by the Greeks themselves. They invented it and said this is absolutely rubbish when they saw the inherent contradictions and the blood and the feud which it led to in their own parliament that they had. They actually put it into the dustbin. Islam came much more later than that. So, people who argue the case that religion or Islam is old and therefore put it behind us, it's a bit of a dead argument in my view.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. When you talk about religion, people do seem to think that you're very old-fashioned somehow. Yeah. But I've seen that during some of my travels, that in certain parts of the world, you're talking about religion or a headscarf. I remember visiting one Muslim country, and I will not mention that, and I was sitting at a conference with some young people. And as a habit, which I think is a good habit, we say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, I was stopped by this young person to say, why do you keep repeating this? Because we have to move forward. And I was quite taken back. Let's take this call. Assalamu alaikum, sister from London.
Wa alaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. Ramzan Mubarak to you.
Ramzan Mubarak to you and everyone who's watching as well, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, sister. What do you have to say?
I'm actually asking about another sister. There's two sisters who I know very well. They're very dear to me, and both of their parents have now passed away. One of the sisters, she got of these two sisters. The eldest one, she got married within days of her mother passing away. But alhamdulillah, she is now, she's in her own home with her own husband and her in-laws. The other sister, they had their father with them, but sadly he passed away on the 1st of July, and he had just spoken and confirmed that the other sister, his daughter would be married to someone. So he just, baat pakki ki thi. So he had just confirmed that yes, they would be married, but then he passed away. So she's not married yet, and there is a big question over. It's just two sisters. There are no brothers, and there's no other family, and there were no other dependents on the father who has passed away now, and he owned a house. And now there is some question over how is it supposed to be divided up, and how do we make sure that we do justice to these two sisters? How do we, make sure that they can?
I think it's a very important question. I'm so sorry, sister, but I think the question must be responded by a scholar. Ummah TV does have a question and answer session, and if you call back, if you put the phone down, or if you speak to my colleague, he will tell you the timing of the question and answer session. The question must be responded from a fiqh perspective, and I think that will be better done by a scholar. Today is very much about this community platform never responds to fiqh questions. We do talk about generally and touch upon this concept of justice from a very different perspective. And justice must be seen done. I'm really sorry to hear what has happened. But if you call back, alhamdulillah, I'm sure that your question will be responded to. Thank you. I think it's because change of times, because our program usually happens
on the evening.
Evening, and we were asked to, because of Ramzan Sharif, we were asked to reschedule that program. So sometimes we get fiqh callers. No, I understand that what you were saying earlier. You talked about minorities and everything, but sometimes I wonder that we do produce leaders from grassroots. We have seen that happening. But then by the time they get to there, they are exactly the same what we got rid of. And we have seen that in Pakistan too.
That's true. It happens here as well, as you mentioned.
Yes, and it happens in UK, of course. And I was just saying to you earlier that I visited a Muslim country where at a conference I kept saying, yes, alhamdulillah, it will happen and we will do this. And this young person said to me, we have to stop saying this. And I was quite taken back, and I said, why? Why can't we work together on it? It seems to be that somehow we have to give something up to attain. And I'm saying, can we achieve justice within a framework? What, for me and for you, it has to be an Islamic framework. We can't come out of that.
That's true, yeah.
It was impossible, but I think I might have offended that young person, because it was very much, why do you keep saying that?
Yeah, and I think with people like this, we need to show them a bit of a broader picture. So they have this very, very vague idea that everything in the Western world is, you know, fantastic, is smooth,
Rosy.
is operational, is rosy. There's, you know, there's ways in which, you know, people can get their voices heard, etc. But I think through our show today, we've demonstrated some examples, at least, which have come to mind about how this is not the case. Actually, when they talk about you know, justice, yes, you know, a democratic system will give us justice for, you know, let's say Pakistan, Bangladesh, other countries, and we're talking about here about MPs' expenses, and we're talking about bankers walking away with, you know, hundreds and thousands of pounds of bonuses, and we're talking about news corporations which tapped into people's phones and mobile phones and hacked their phones and stole their privacy, and we talk about, you know, freedom that we get in this country. Their privacy was destroyed. That kind of, I think, destroys that narrative that they've been fed all their lives, that everything over here is fantastic. There's checks and balances, there's procedures. It's not the case, unfortunately.
No. Yes, because, but then, Majid, people always think that the grass is always greener on the other side. It always is. People
so we need to give them that philosophy as well, that, you know, you think this is okay, but, you know, the grass is greener on the other side, well, when it comes to Islamic justice.
Yes, absolutely. We're, I think, literally 4 or 5 minutes away. We are literally 4 or 5 minutes away from the end of the session. But